The container truck stopped at the side of the national highway. It was almost dawn, and a light drizzle fell like a thin mist covering the windshield. Inside the cabin, Trong took a drag of his cigarette, eyes gazing toward the dim streetlights in the distance. 10 years of long-haul driving, there was no place he hadn't driven to. But there were some roads where just closing his eyes would bring every image back. As if it had just happened. "Aren't you going home?" "No, I've got an early trip tomorrow." "You keep driving like this all the time, do you ever feel like you're alive? But not really living?" Trong stayed silent, eyes fixed on the steering wheel, hands gripping tight as if holding something back. He had never told anyone what happened that year. That rainy night when he first drove over the Mong Pass. The night that seemed normal, until that girl appeared. The roadside diner was deserted, with only the faint static of the TV murmuring in the corner. The old lady who ran the place poured him more tea, eyes scrutinizing him. "You've been looking strange lately. Can't sleep?" "Just the usual, probably from driving too many nights." "No, not that. You look like someone who dreams a lot but doesn't want to wake up." Trong gave a faint smile, but didn't answer. Last night, he dreamed again. This time it wasn't just the crying in the truck, but also a cold hand placed on his shoulder, the smell of wet earth, damp hair, and a voice echoing by his ear. "Do you remember me?" He used to think it was just psychological aftershocks, until the dashcam recorded things he didn't see with his own eyes. Until a fellow driver, asleep in the adjacent cabin, jolted awake at midnight and shouted, "Someone was just sitting in the backseat of your truck." No one believed him, but he didn't need them to. Because some things, only those who've lived through them would understand. That afternoon, after passing the Baco slope, he saw an old lady sitting by the roadside, holding a small bundle of incense sticks. She handed him one and said, "If you're driving at night, light this. It might save your life. But remember, don't pick up strangers." Trong reached out to take it, asking nothing more, but throughout that trip over the Mong Pass, he didn't play music like he usually did, nor did he dare look at the rearview mirror. His hands trembled slightly, sweat soaked his back, and in the draft that slipped through the window gap was the faint scent of burning incense. Since that trip, he began to change. He laughed less, spoke less. Even his beloved younger sister no longer got to hear his road stories. "Why have you been so distant lately? You used to call often. But now, it's nothing, just some things I can't talk about. A dream, or real? It's something that keeps coming back, like a shadow sitting behind me every time I look in the mirror." People say being a driver is tough, not just because of the driving, but because every journey is a test of personal limits. Every sleepless night is a confrontation with oneself, with the darkness, the cold emptiness, and sometimes with things that have no name. And the story begins at the 7th curve. When it rained, the wind howled, and Trong saw the first girl asking for a ride on Mong Pass. Bin Din. Trong didn't believe in the spiritual, but after 10 years of long-haul driving, there were a few rules he would never break. Never stop mid-pass at night. Never look directly at strangers walking along the shoulder. And never play music at the 7th curve. That night, he was on his way from Toi Hoa to Kai Nan. The wind was picking up. The Mong Pass was known for being slippery, especially in the foggy season, the road slick as if greased. Trong dimmed the cabin lights, eyes strained toward the front. A motorbike sped past. The passenger looked back, the glance caught in his mirror, cold and lifeless. He felt a chill up his spine, but said nothing. As he approached the 7th curve, the truck slowed down. Just as he turned the steering wheel to the right, a white figure appeared in the middle of the road. A person, a girl, standing in the middle of the pass, head bowed, clutching her schoolbag, dressed in a white student ao-dai. Trong hit the brakes. The truck halted just in front of the girl. She didn't move, didn't lift her head, just stood there, as if she had been waiting. Trong rolled down the window. The rain blew into his face. "Where are you going at this hour? The pass is dangerous." No answer. The girl remained silent. The wind flipped the edge of her ao-dai. Her small hands clutched the strap of her bag tightly. Trong looked around. No one else. No motorbike, no lights except for his headlights. Do you want to get in? I'll take you out of the pass. There's a residential area ahead. Still silence. Then suddenly she stepped forward and opened the back door. Trong turned around to look. The seat was empty. He heard the door close, but didn't turn back. His heart pounded. The truck moved on, silent, no sound, no movement behind him. Trong didn't dare look in the mirror. His palms started to sweat. After crossing the pass, he stopped at a rest station, opened the back door. No one there, only mist clinging to the window glass, and a faint handprint, as if someone had just touched it. That night, Trong didn't sleep. He placed the talisman the old lady gave him weeks ago on the dashboard. For the first time in his life, his hands trembled when starting the engine. Not because of steep hills, not because of slippery roads, but because of one distinct feeling. The backseat was not empty. The next morning, Trong stopped by a familiar car wash in Song Khao town. He sat at a nearby cafe, eyes fixed on his phone screen. His fingers scrolled to the dashcam footage from the night before. The seventh curve appeared clearly. The truck stopped. Headlights shone directly onto the figure in white. His heart pounded. The image wasn't blurry. The girl stood there, holding her bag with both hands, head bowed, and then she stepped forward. But what made his spine go cold wasn't the girl. It was the moment the car door opened on its own. No one pulled it, no hand reached out, but the door opened, then closed, clear, unmistakable. He rewound it again and again. Each time he watched, his heart grew colder. The car wash owner, Mr. Thuck, came in from outside, smiling. Stayed up all night again. Old man, you look like a ghost. Had a little incident last night. Something wrong with the truck? No, but do you believe someone could hitch a ride without leaving footprints? Mr. Thuck paused, looked at Trong. You're giving me goosebumps with that question. But I've got a friend. He told me the exact same story at that very pass. Trong looked up. What happened to him? He used to drive a passenger bus. Every night crossing the pass, he'd see a girl standing by the roadside. One time, he stopped and the backseat was ice cold. After that, he quit, never drove again. Trong nodded, asking no more. He pulled out his phone and transferred the video to an external drive. Something urged him to keep it. Not to prove anything, but to face it. That night, when he parked at the rest stop, he played the dashcam clip again. But this time, there was a new detail. In the moment the rearview mirror trembled slightly. It reflected clearly, long, soaking wet hair covering half a face staring straight into the lens. He abruptly shut it off. Eyes wide, heart pounding. Outside the truck, the night wind howled through the door crack. And for the first time, he heard the voice, not in a dream, not from the headphones, but a whisper right behind his seat. Next time, don't leave me alone on the pass again. And Trong. 3 days later, Trong stopped at an old roadside diner near the base of Mong Pass. The place nestled under a big old Indian almond tree. The sign faded, only a few legible letters remained. An elderly blind woman sat inside, fingers running over incense sticks. Her voice slow and measured. You're not from around here. But your aura, it's similar. Like the one who caused it all. Trong sat down, poured some water, said nothing. Last night, someone stood at the head of the pass. Also wearing white, also silent, but she wasn't waiting for a bus. She was waiting for an apology. He furrowed his brows. Do you know what happened at the 7th curve? Of course. About 20 years ago, a passenger bus carrying over 40 people vanished on the pass. The bus was never found, nor the people. It's like the entire trip was erased from the map. No one investigated? They did, but no one saw anything. Some say, the bus didn't take the wrong route. It took the same path, as something else. Trong sat in thought. He pulled out his phone and showed a picture from the dashcam, the faint handprint. And the girl's face in the reflection. What's her name? The old woman was silent for a long time. Then replied, Lynn. Her name was Lynn, 17 years old, a top student. That year, her mother took her to the bus station for an exam. Both disappeared. The family lit incense for 10 years. No one dares cross the pass at night anymore. Trong gripped his phone tightly. The mountain breeze crept into the diner, bringing with it the damp, decaying smell of the forest. The cold didn't come from the air. It came from his chest. If I wanted to find that bus, where would I start? Don't look. Some things aren't meant to be known. Once you know, there's no going back. But if you truly want to, go to the deep lake past the pass. Some saw a broken wheel lying beneath. Others saw a figure sitting in the bus, still waiting. That night, Trong drove to the exact spot by the lake the old woman had mentioned. He didn't get out of the truck, just turned on the headlights, pointing straight at the lake's surface. The water was still as glass, but in the reflection of the lights, he saw a rusty chunk of metal, half submerged, and faintly, a fogged-up window with something inside, sitting motionless. Trong didn't dare step down. His hand reached for the talisman, then slipped it into his pocket. The headlights stayed fixed on the water. The wind picked up, the window rattled, and in that moment, a young girl's voice echoed from the truck radio, though it was turned off. Does anyone still remember bus number 42? I'm still on it. Trong returned to Kai Nan that night. He parked his truck at the old lot near the foot of T Nai Bridge, where an abandoned container now served as a temporary rest stop for long-haul drivers. Sitting under the dim yellow light, he opened his laptop and plugged in the hard drive. The dashcam footage from the previous night was still there, but this time, when he slowed it down at the moment the headlights lit up the lake, the reflection was no longer blurry. A face appeared more clearly. Eyes wide open, wet, loose hair, and around the neck, a dark purple bruise, like a mark left by strangling. He jolted and slammed the laptop shut. The container door slammed loudly behind him. Trong turned around. It was Hung, his close friend from the early days of running the north-south route. You look like hell. Another sleepless night? I gotta ask you something. Back when we first started, did anyone ever tell you about a bus that disappeared on the Kumong Pass? You mean bus 42? That's like a legend now. When I was still learning to drive, the old guys talked about it all the time. It vanished clean, no tire marks, no skid trails. Only what? There was one driver. Rumor has it he survived, but he never drove again. Disappeared completely from the transport world. Trong squinted. What was his name? I don't remember exactly. Just know his name used to be Fuck. Everyone at the depot called him Fuck Ga. He was driving a bus full of students to an exam. That night, none of them came back. Fuck Ga, fuck. Hung saw Trong fall silent for a long time. What? Something wrong? You look pale. Fuck is my father's name, but he's never said a word about that. I only know he used to drive buses. Then he opened a scrapyard, moved back to the countryside to raise chickens. Wait, so that means... Trong shot up. An old memory flashed in his mind. When he was 10, he once got curious and opened his father's metal cabinet. Inside was a tightly locked metal box. When his father found out, he got so angry he hit Trong for the first time ever. That night, Trong didn't sleep. He drove straight home. The small tin-roofed house sat in the middle of the fields. His father was sitting outside, whittling bamboo to build a gourd trellis. He looked up as Trong arrived, eyes unsurprised. Back so suddenly, what's going on? I want to ask you something. The bus from 2003 that disappeared on Kumong Pass. What do you know about it? Mr. Fuck was silent for a long time. Then he put the bundle of bamboo down, eyes staring into the distance. I thought you'd never ask. You were the one driving that trip, weren't you? Yes, I was, but not alone. That night, the main driver backed out last minute. I stepped in. The brakes failed. It was raining. The road was slick. I chose to swerve, to avoid hitting the group of students. But what? But the bus overturned. It plunged into the lake. I got out because I broke the window. The rest sank. I couldn't save anyone, and I never dared to go back. Trong clenched his fists. There's a girl who hasn't moved on. Her name's Lin. I see her every night. The wind from the rice fields howled loudly. Mr. Fuck closed his eyes and pulled a crumpled old paper from his pocket. On it was a list of every passenger on that bus. The last line read, Nguyen T. Kim Lin, 17 years old, seat number 7. Trong looked at it. His hands trembled. Dad, if you said sorry now, would it be too late? Mr. Fuck didn't answer. He just sat there, clutching the paper, eyes gazing toward the foggy pass in the distance, a place where memories never rested. Trong left the countryside the very next morning. On the way back to his usual parking lot, he didn't turn on the radio, didn't play any music. His mind was filled with his father's voice, low, hoarse, and shaking, like the sound of screeching brakes dragging through the mountain pass that night. When he neared Ba Di Bridge, he saw the old container lot behind the gas station was completely empty. No one around, but strangely, on the dusty ground, there were very fresh tire tracks, long and deep, as if a large convoy had just passed through. He parked, stepped down. The lot was silent, only the wind could be heard. He walked along the row of abandoned containers, eyes toward the far end, where a dark-colored passenger bus, covered in moss and algae, was parked off-center like it didn't belong there. The bus had no license plate. He walked closer. The door was slightly ajar. No one inside. Trong stepped up one step. As his hand touched the door, the phone in his pocket rang. It was Hung. Where are you, man? I just passed by your usual spot. Your truck's there but you're not. Engine's still running. I thought you fell asleep. I walked down to the back lot. There's this old passenger bus. It's strange. Do you know who left it there? What bus? What back lot? There's no road back there. I went by just yesterday. That area's been fenced off for years. Trong ended the call. His heart pounded. He turned around to look behind. The rusted container door was no longer open like before. The wind began to whistle through the cracks. Trong stepped back, but when he turned again, the passenger bus was gone. Only tire marks pressed into the soft soil remained. He ran to the front of the lot. No one there, no other vehicles. On the dusty cement, there was a wet circular streak, small, like a footprint, but dragged out in an S shape, like someone crawling. That night, Trong lay in his truck cabin, unable to sleep. He replayed Hung's call. Hung's voice trembled then, not from fear, but because at the end of the call, there was a strange sound. The soft creak of leather, like someone had just sat down in the backseat. Trong whipped around. The cabin was empty, but the thin curtain behind his back was swaying slightly, even though the windows were closed tight. He reached back and pulled the curtain. Nothing there, but on the pillow was a long strand of hair, still wet, and the smell of wet earth, of burnt hair. The scent of memories that didn't belong to daylight returned again, thick and suffocating. The next day, Trong returned to the Mong Pass, not to drive, but to go down to the deep lake the old woman had once mentioned. He brought along a long rope, a flashlight, and a small camera strapped to his chest. Evening fell. Fog began to roll down from the mountains, spreading across the surface of the water. The lake was so still it seemed to absorb all sound. He carefully stepped along the damp soil, following the worn path down to the edge. The mud underfoot squelched with every step. No one accompanied him, only the sound of frogs and distant insects filled the air. Trong stood in front of the water. A gentle breeze brushed past his ears. He turned on the flashlight and shone it into the lake. The beam didn't reach the bottom. The surface only reflected his own face, blurred and cold. He exhaled deeply, then wrapped the rope around his waist, tied the end to a nearby tree, and slowly waded in. The muddy water reached his knees. Every step felt like the black water clung to him, pulling him back. When the water reached his waist, the light struck something faintly glimmering beneath the surface. A pane of glass. He moved closer. It was indeed a windshield, cracked and broken. His hand reached out and touched it. The mud sank beneath him. He peered inside. The driver's seat was bent to one side. The passenger seat was still intact, and something was sitting there. Trong recoiled in shock. Water splashed everywhere, but he didn't flee. He shone the light again. Inside the cabin was pitch black, but clearly, there was hair, wet, covering a face. The chest-mounted camera began to glitch. In his earpiece came a faint static, followed by a whisper. "Don't forget me, don't forget that bus." Trong panicked and scrambled back to shore. The surface behind him remained still. But in his ears, that voice didn't stop. It didn't seem to come from the equipment, but from inside his mind. When he reached the shore, he realized he had dropped the flashlight. In the twilight, he looked back one last time at the water. Nothing remained. Only a short flash of light appeared behind the lake, as if reflecting off a bus headlight. But there was no bus there. And on the grassy bank where he had just knelt were two small footprints, soaked wet. Next to them was a white ribbon, tied in a bow, completely soaked, like the kind schoolgirls used to tie their hair. He bent down and picked it up. The ribbon was dripping, ice cold. Trong clutched it tightly, then looked toward the pass. The sky darkened, the insects went silent, and the wind stopped blowing. 1 week later, Trong returned to the small roadside diner near the base of the pass. The blind old woman was still there, fingers tracing over dry incense sticks. The diner was empty. Only the static-filled radio played an old news broadcast. Trong gently placed the white ribbon on the table. It belonged to Lin, didn't it? The old woman didn't touch it, but tilted her head slightly. That thing is cold. The living shouldn't keep it too long. It burdens the soul. I need to know more. What does she still want? She doesn't hold a grudge, but she hasn't moved on. Back then, someone showed me her class photo. The whole class posed in front of the bus. After the accident, anyone who kept that photo ended up facing misfortune. Only one copy remains now, but no one dares keep it. Where is it? At Mr. Sao's place, the old school guard. 10 kilometers from here, but his mind isn't sharp anymore. Sometimes he remembers, sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes, he only remembers one person in the photo. Trong picked up the ribbon and left the diner. The abandoned school stood in the middle of an open field, overgrown with wild grass. The walls were stained by years of rain and sun. Trong pushed open the rusty gate. An old man sat in the courtyard, cloudy eyes staring forward, holding a worn photograph, mumbling, "This girl here, Lin, pretty, but pitiful. Seat number 7. The bus flipped. She held that bag so tight, no one could pry it from her. Trong sat down beside him. Mr. Sao handed him the photo. It was faded. 2 rows of students sat in front of the bus. One of them, the girl in the center, long hair tied with a white ribbon, smiled faintly. Seat number 7, license plate 86B7421. Trong looked closer. Among the group, one face stared directly at the camera. Not smiling, eyes wide, skin pale. He flipped the photo over. Scribbled on the back was a rough note. The last bus ride, Lin, seat 7. The breeze passed gently over the old roof tiles. A corner of the photo peeled up. Trong lifted it gently. Beneath was another faint line. If someone finds this photo, please bring Lin back. Don't let her wait forever on the bus. That night, Trong slept in his truck cabin by the highway. The photo rested in his chest pocket. At midnight, there were 3 knocks on the truck window. Slow, soft, but distinct. He turned on the light and pulled the curtain. No one there. Only the white ribbon, now completely dry, rested on the steering wheel. And the passenger seat had a slight indent, as if someone had just left. Trong couldn't sleep after that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lin's face from the photo, her gaze piercing through him, waiting for something unsaid. At dawn, he drove back to the field near the lake, the place where he had once stepped into the water to find the windshield. The sky was overcast, thick with fog. He walked slowly along the lakeside, eyes scanning the patches of soaked grass. Then he stopped. An old brown school backpack lay among the reeds. The zipper was rusted, the leather peeling. It was unmistakable. It couldn't have floated up from the lake unless something had brought it up. Trong put on gloves and lifted the backpack. It was heavy. There was still something inside. He opened it. The books were moldy and falling apart. A small diary was wedged between 2 textbooks. He carefully opened it. The first page bore neat handwriting. Lin, Class 12A3 Diary of the Final Days. The first entry read, "Tomorrow I'll go up the pass. I'm so excited. It's an important exam trip, but also my chance to confess to Trin. I'm sitting in seat number 7. I chose it because it's by the window. And because it's the day I was born. Trong turned to another page. Some lines were blurred, but a few were still clear. The bus is moving now. I see Trin dozing off in the front seat. Outside the window. It's raining. Everyone's chatting and laughing. I just hope the bus doesn't get there too quickly. I want to stay here forever. Beside them all. The final page, cut off abruptly, contained just one sentence. If something happens to me, someone please bring me back. I don't want to be left down here forever. Trong clenched the notebook. A gust of wind swept across the lake. Biting cold. That afternoon, he brought the backpack to the old mountain temple nearby, where the statue of Guanyin looked down toward the pass. The abbot was an elderly monk. After hearing the story, he simply nodded. There are spirits who don't seek vengeance. They're only waiting to be called by name. You bringing this here was right. But if you want to guide the girl away, someone must lead her, truly lead her. It has to be someone she chooses to trust. She chose me? From the moment you stopped for her at the 7th curve. She followed you. Among dozens of drivers that night. She only got on your truck. That's a choice. A bond. A karmic tie. That night, Trong stayed at the temple. He placed the backpack in front of the Buddha statue. The monk chanted outside. At midnight, as he sat silently watching the flickering candlelight inside the shrine, a breeze swept through. The curtain fluttered slightly. He turned around. The girl from the photo, Lin, was standing there. Not fully human, blurry, but it was clearly her. Loose hair, white dress, her face no longer cold. Only her gaze, sad. She didn't speak, just looked at him, then bowed slightly, very slightly, and vanished. When he opened his eyes again, it was morning. On the backpack was a wildflower. Dried, but intact. He understood. Lin had accepted, but she hadn't moved on. Because one person still hadn't admitted their fault. The next morning, Trong left the temple, carrying the backpack now wrapped by the abbot in a white cloth, tied with a dried lotus stem. He didn't return to the city. Instead, he steered his truck toward his father's hometown. The sky remained heavy, thick clouds pressing down on his shoulders. When Trong stepped into the yard, Mr. Fuck was cutting grass. He didn't look up, only asked quietly, "What are you back for? Do you still remember the girl in seat number 7? Mr. Fuck froze. The sickle dropped to the ground. Trong placed the backpack in front of his father. Slowly. I met her. I heard her voice. I saw the lake. And I read her diary. Mr. Fuck sank down onto the steps. His face went pale. His eyes no longer avoided. At the time, I thought I had no choice. The bus was sliding. Brakes failed. I swerved to avoid the oncoming convoy. But I know I was wrong to walk away. I left those kids behind. Trong nodded slightly. She doesn't hold a grudge. But she's been waiting for an apology. From the one who held the wheel that day. Mr. Fuck said nothing, just sat there, hands clenching the grass. Trong placed Lin's class photo on the steps. Below it were the words, "Please bring me back. Come with me, to the pass, just once, to put it to rest." That same afternoon, father and son stood at the 7th curve. The mountain wind whistled by. Trong placed the backpack by the roadside. Mr. Fuck knelt beside it. No one spoke for a long while. Then he muttered, "Lin, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't save you. I couldn't even admit it. But from today on, if you're still angry, follow me. Don't be angry at anyone else." A breeze passed through, gentle, but unmistakable. Trong bent down and picked up the dried lotus. It had softened, as if it had just been watered. That night, Trong drove alone. The cabin lights glowed gently. He adjusted the rearview mirror. The back seat was still empty, no longer heavy as before. The radio played an instrumental melody. Midway through the song, a strange sound faded in. Very faint. "Thank you. I'm going now." Trong said nothing, just kept his eyes on the road ahead. But his eyes were wet. His heart lighter. At Mong Pass, many drivers once told stories of a girl in white waving for rides. But since that night, no one saw her again. The final ride had ended. No more wait, no more chill. Only the wind, and a trace of sorrow, from the living. For one who never had the chance to grow up. 1 month later, Trong returned to the Mong Pass. He didn't go alone. Behind him was a convoy of small trucks, old colleagues. They had once heard his story, once doubted him, but after that year's trip over the pass, no one joked about it anymore. The container truck stopped right at the 7th curve. Trong stepped down, holding a bundle of incense sticks. He placed one into a small crack in the roadside rock. The wind still blew, but no longer harsh, no longer bitterly cold like those nights before. A salt and pepper-haired driver came up beside him, hands clasped in respect. "So, it's over, huh?" "Yeah, she's gone. I saw her once. Her eyes looked through my windshield, so sad. Not angry, just sad. I felt the same, from beginning to end. All she did was wait for someone to come back. Not for revenge, just to hear someone admit their fault." The whole group went quiet. The youngest in the crew, new to the job, looked around and softly said, "I thought this kind of thing only happened in ghost stories. Didn't expect it to be real." The older driver chuckled. "Ghost stories aren't as scary as people refusing to face the truth. This is a story about people. The living." Dusk settled in. The trucks started their engines one by one and drove off. Trong stayed behind. He looked at the curve one last time. His eyes no longer wary, no longer afraid. He placed the glass-framed class photo beside the reeds. Next to it, the white ribbon. The breeze passed through, gently lifting the ribbon, spinning it for a moment before it fell, like a delicate petal. He returned to his truck. The cabin was quiet. The rearview mirror reflected the backseat, empty. Clear. No handprints. No strands of hair. No creaking sounds. He started the engine. For the first time, he didn't check the mirror. Didn't look back. That day, Mong Pass had no more weeping. Only the sound of engines blending with the wind. And behind them, one final farewell, unseen, but understood by all. The ride had reached its end. And the living had finally found a way to let go. If this story touched